What's up, guys? Welcome to the Debate Mates. My name is Matthew Swanberg, and today I am continuing part 2 of a 6-part series discussing why every NBA team should be optimistic coming into the 2025-2026 NBA season. Yesterday's video, I discussed the Atlantic Division teams, the Celtics, the Nets, the 76ers, the Knicks, and the Raptors. And today I'm moving into the NBA Central Division in the Eastern Conference. So that's going to be the Bulls, the Bucks, Pistons, Pacers, and the Cavaliers. So if you're a fan of any of the teams that I talked about yesterday, make sure you check the video out. You're going to be happy about it because I only said positive things about those teams, which was a little difficult for the Nets and the 76ers, if I'm being honest. But today it's going to be a lot easier to say positive things about these teams because we're talking about 4 teams that made the playoffs last year, that were really competitive last year, and the Chicago Bulls, a perennial play-in juggernaut. So I'm excited to talk about these 5 teams. And like I said, make sure you guys check out yesterday's video. Whether or not you're a fan of those teams, doesn't matter. Still some great content, if I do say so myself. And hopefully today is another banger. So let's just jump right into it with the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're going to start off with the cream of the crop, and not only the Central Division, but in the East and in the NBA. Last year, the Cavaliers were the second best team in the NBA. They had an incredible start to the year, a historically good start to the year. Offensively and defensively, this team was one of the best in the league, and they got knocked out by a really hot Pacers team in the playoffs and are basically running it back this season. The big exception, the big change is they've swapped out Ty Jerome for Lonzo Ball, and that is actually my big positive for this team. One of my big positives for this team. I mean, there's so much to be optimistic for with this team. I could just say sort of generally that they're one of the best teams in the NBA, and they'll probably be in the Eastern Conference Finals, especially given the weakness in the Eastern Conference. But that just feels too, like I said, generic, too broad. I want to get a little bit more specific and talk about things that actually changed. And Lonzo Ball is the biggest change. And apparently he is really turning heads at training camp. I've always been a big fan of Lonzo Ball, or not always, but ever since he's been on the Bulls, I've been a big fan of Lonzo Ball. I love the way he really changed the culture there in Chicago, the way he pushed the ball. He's a fantastic defender. He's around 36% from 3 for his career, and I think he fits in perfectly with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Of course, this is all contingent on how healthy he can be. If he can play 65 to 70 games, which we haven't seen him do in a really long time, and if he can give you 15 to 20 minutes a game, then this is a guy that really moves the needle, I think, in not only the Eastern Conference, but potentially just in the NBA in general, because of the defense he brings, the height, the size he brings, and of course the shooting that he brings. As like I said, career well above average, close to 40% from 3. Last year he was 34% from 3 in limited action in his first season back after a knee injury that people like Stephen A. Smith said was going to make him never be able to play basketball again. He said he was never going to be able to walk up the stairs again, and he shot 34% from 3 last year. So I think that number goes up even higher this year, and on a obviously much more talented team than last year's Chicago Bulls. And he's just way more versatile than Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome was sort of singularly focused on scoring last year. He was a bit of a playmaker, developed into that role more as the season went on, but he was a spark plug off the bench, and he was just on the court to score. And he'd have games where he could go get you 20, he could win you a quarter, he could win you a couple minutes, a half, he could even win you a game every once in a while. And I don't know if Lonzo has that same capability on offense as far as putting the ball in the basket goes, but defensively he's going to be able to cover some holes that Garland and Donovan Mitchell might present due to their lack of size. He's going to be able to hit open threes, he's going to move the ball, he's going to be able to score off the ball, create off the ball, and like I said, just defense, rebounding, pushing the pace. Every team that Lonzo Ball plays on, they sort of adapt to his style, and his style is just making other players better. I'm excited to see what he looks like next to Mobley, throwing lobs to Jared Allen. And like I said, defensively, I think he makes his team incredibly versatile, incredibly dangerous. Last year, I remember watching the Celtics and the Cavs play early in the season and later in the season, and thinking this is going to be a tough matchup if these two teams who looked like they were on a crash course to play in the conference finals do meet in the conference finals, because Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, they just can't hang with Tatum, with Brown, and with Drew Holiday when they get switched on to him, when they have to guard him in the post. And Lonzo Ball, although you maybe don't want him on the court in those high leverage situations, he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to cover some of those weaknesses. He's going to be able to guard another team's best perimeter player, guard another team's best wing player due to his size. So I'm just really excited. I think he elevates this team to a whole nother level on defense, and at the peak of his powers makes this team a lot better on offense than Ty Jerome could have. I think Lonzo Ball is a little bit less feast or famine than Ty Jerome, and he impacts the game more than just with his scoring. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons to be excited for this Cavaliers team. I think they probably will take a step back. Like I said, last year they were historic. The start they got off to was incredible. This Cavs team still sleepwalks to a top 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, and Lonzo Ball is a big ceiling raiser for them. They're going to be good whether or not Lonzo is healthy, whether or not he plays. But Lonzo is the guy I think that could potentially elevate this team to getting past the second round, making it to a conference finals, and potentially making it to a finals. Obviously, a lot of it is contingent on how much Evan Mobley continues to grow, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, how those guys can stay healthy, how DeAndre Hunter looks. Because Lonzo is still on this team the 7th or 8th most important player. But I just think that's a really, really improved 7th or 8th most important player. Whereas last year, Ty Jerome was good, but kind of got exposed in the playoffs, and again, was a little bit more feast or famine, whereas Lonzo impacts the game in so many different ways that I think he's going to be more of a steady hand for this Cavaliers team. So if I'm a Cavaliers fan, there's a million reasons to be optimistic. Why wouldn't you be after how the regular season went last year? Lonzo Ball is just one of the many reasons, and the newest reason why I think there should be a lot of optimism in Cleveland. Moving on to what was the second best team in the conference or in the division last year, that was the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers, like the Celtics yesterday, are going to look at this season, go into the season without their superstar, without their face of the franchise. As Tyrese Halliburton in the final game of the NBA season tore his Achilles, will probably not be back at all this season. And when you're talking about a team's identity, it's hard to find any guy who exemplifies their team identity more than Tyrese Halliburton. The Pacers are pace and space. They're fun. They're energetic. They run the ball. And Tyrese Halliburton was the center of that. He's that team's heartbeat. He's that team's captain. And they're going to be without him this year. I don't want to tip my hand too much to when I get into Eastern Conference record predictions, but I'm kind of bullish on the Indiana Pacers this year, even having said all of that, even without having Tyrese Halliburton. I think that their depth is exceptional. I think it's towards the top of the league, especially in the guard spot, and I think they have one of the best coaches in the league. So if I'm a Pacers fan, I'm optimistic because of that depth and that head coach, Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle has a career 54% winning percentage. He hasn't always coached juggernauts. They weren't a juggernaut when he first came to Indiana, and even last year, the last couple of years, they've been a team that aren't supremely talented, but always better than the sum of their parts. In Dallas, he got the best out of some teams where it was Luka and a lot of the other guys, and even before that in Dallas with Dirk and rosters that weren't constructed of a bunch of superstars and MVPs, he's always been able to manage deep into the season and have deep playoff runs and have teams that are competitive, that host playoff series, that get home court advantage. And this Pacers team doesn't have those same aspirations as being a top 4 seed going into the Eastern Conference this year, but a Rick Carlisle coach team is always going to be gritty. They're going to play well defensively. They will have an identity. And the Pacers are deep, like I said, and they have a lot of continuity. This isn't a team that has completely tried to undergo a facelift because they've lost Tyrese Halliburton like the Celtics kind of are. This is a team that's still pretty set in their ways, that I think they're going to play pretty similarly to how they played last year. And some people would argue, although Halliburton was sort of the team's heartbeat, that Siakam is the better player than Tyrese Halliburton. Siakam's a little bit more of an ISO guy. Siakam's a little bit more of a half-court, slow down, get you a bucket type of guy, a guy that you need to win you games in the playoffs especially, but also in the regular season. He's going to win them a couple games, and he's going to be hopefully an all-NBA type of guy. A lot of this does fall on his shoulders, and if he gets hurt, then a lot of what I'm saying could be wrong. But even excluding him from the conversation, you're looking at Andrew Nembhard, who averaged 13 and 5 on really, really mind-blowingly good, unsustainable efficiency without Tyrese Halliburton last year and in the playoffs. This is a guy who I think could be a most improved player type of guy, a guy who could flirt with an all-star team. I don't think he's quite a 20-point-per-game scorer, but if the defense holds up and he can get you 15 to 18 points per game, like I said, this is a most improved guy. This is maybe an all-star snub type of guy, not an all-star, but somebody that we talk about as he should get a couple looks because I think he's going to be really good. He's really talented, and he had some moves on SGA in the playoffs where it looked like a guy who was playing like a superstar, who was playing with the confidence of a guy who thinks he is a superstar. And you need guys on a team that is going to have to overachieve to have that sort of mentality. And he's a tough guy. He's a dog. He's a bulldog. And I'm excited to see what he looks like, getting to man the ship, getting to be the point guard. And his starting backcourt mate is going to be Benedict Mathurin. Mathurin averaged 16 points per game last season. I think he falls under the radar a lot. He was hurt a lot last year, and just with all of the exciting players on the Pacers, a lot of people I think forget about Mathurin and his impact and his potential. He's a bucket getter, super athletic, was able to play some really good defense in the finals and honestly won them a couple of games. I believe it was game one or game three. I can't remember quite which one, but he had an incredible fourth quarter where he just could not stop getting to the basket, could not stop scoring, could not stop putting pressure on the rim, getting to the free throw line. The 3-point shot has been a little inconsistent, but he's just good in the mid range, decent from three, has continued to grow in that area. And like I said, he's athletic, he's explosive, he can get to the rim, he'll put pressure on the rim. So the two of them in the backcourt, I'm really excited about them. And that's a starting level backcourt for any team in the NBA, I honestly think. So I think this team could still make a postseason push, to be quite honest. And I'm really excited to see what the two of those guys look like. And then in the front court, Miles Turner, I think, is a huge, or I don't think, I know is a huge loss. He was, again, part of that culture, part of that heartbeat in Indiana, the ability to stretch the court, the athleticism, the defense. So losing him is obviously a huge, pretty gaping hole, but you kind of substitute that for Isaiah Jackson, who was unhealthy a lot of last season, and Jay Huff, who was getting some most improved under the radar buzz when he was with Memphis for a lot of last year. Obviously, those are huge drop offs from Miles Turner. That will be the biggest area of need for the Pacers going into next season, trying to address the lack of front court depth and talent. But I think this team is really, really good, and I'm optimistic to see what this depth can look like together. And then, of course, they still have TJ McConnell, who was lights out in the finals, and Ben Shepherd, who's a good defender, another gritty defender. They're going to have a good defense this year. They have a lot of talented wing defenders on this team with Aaron Nesmith as well. So I'm just excited to see what this team looks like. They've got some really good, exciting backcourt pieces. They're going to be good on defense, I think. So I'm optimistic because this team is deep. This team is cohesive. This team is kind of running it back with the exception of obviously their two main stars, but they have a lot of guys who know how to play together, who know how to play Pacers basketball, and they're coached by a guy who can't help but win in the regular season especially. So I'm optimistic. If I'm a fan of the Pacers, if I'm a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks, I am optimistic because as far as I know, Giannis Antetokounmpo is putting on a Milwaukee Bucks jersey on opening day, and that's good enough for me. The Bucks have turned every stone to show Giannis that they are committed. They waived and stretched Damian Lillard in the offseason, which was unheard of, to be able to sign Miles Turner to poach him from the aforementioned Indiana Pacers. And outside of that move, I think they have gotten a lot more athletic. And in the recent years, the Bucks lacked a lot of athleticism. Brook Lopez is aging, Chris Middleton aging and injured, Damian Lillard aging and injured. They were just kind of a team that were getting run out of the gym a lot. They were a team that couldn't hang with the younger teams. And this team has kind of substituted some of that old guy, some of the old guys for some youth, and guys like Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, who aren't great but are NBA level players. They were members of the worst offense in the league last year, so not tooting their horn too much and saying that they're going to be huge needle movers, but they play in the NBA. And some guys for the Bucks last year, frankly, probably shouldn't have. They also have AJ Green and Taurean Prince, who again are probably ideally 10th men in the NBA, but at least they are capable of getting minutes on an NBA floor. So I'm excited to see what this team can look like around Giannis. And just as long as they have Giannis, they're going to win they're going to be above 500, just having Giannis. And they're going to put him at point guard this year, they've said. They're going to let point Giannis be a thing. That's kind of always been a thing. And this year we're going to really see what it could look like completely unleashed. So if I'm a Bucks fan, as long as that guy is a Buck, and they bring in Thanasis Antetokounmpo in the offseason to show Giannis the commitment, to show Giannis that they still want to be committed to him this season. So I think they're going to be a decent team, and led by Giannis, there's always reasons for optimism because unless they're playing probably the Nuggets, maybe the Thunder, maybe the Lakers, depending on how you feel about a healthy Luka Doncic, they're going to have the best player on the court. So point Giannis is the main reason to be optimistic coming into the season. And then, of course, like I said, some added athleticism. And Miles Turner is, I think, an upgrade over Brook Lopez with the shooting, with the durability, with the defense. So I'm excited to see what Giannis looks like next to him, and just excited to see any team that is led by Giannis Antetokounmpo. Moving on to the Detroit Pistons, who I thought were better than the Bucks last year. It's kind of crazy looking at this now. Maybe I have this in the wrong order, but the Pistons seemed like they should have been better than the Bucks last year. The crazy jump that they had. I'm optimistic for the Pistons because of Jaden Ivey and Ausar Thompson coming into the season healthy. Jaden Ivey came into last season healthy, but then he had a femur injury that kept him out for a good chunk of the season, and Ausar Thompson was recovering from blood clots. Ausar is similarly talented to his twin brother Amen, and he is an athletic freak of nature. He is uber talented, uber aggressive, and just needs to expand his offensive game a little bit more. But having a full offseason to do that and coming into the season healthy, I think he's going to look great next to Cade Cunningham. He's another slasher, another guy who can handle the ball, and Jaden Ivey does both of those things, plus shoots the ball at a 40% clip last year, 41%, and averaged 18 points per game on 46% shooting. So incredibly athletic, incredibly efficient too, a really good shooter, and he can take the role of what Dennis Schroeder was doing last year, which was kind of being the clutch guy, point guard when Cade had to be off the court. And I think Jaden Ivey is much more well equipped to do that than Dennis Schroeder, although Schroeder is the veteran. Ivey is infinitely more talented, a great shooter, like I said, very athletic and aggressive. So I'm excited to see what the two of them can look like with Cade Cunningham. They're going to give him the opportunity to get off the ball a little bit more. And Cade's a really talented post player due to his size of being a point guard, being 6'7", 6'8", just a sort of freak of nature type of guy, like a Luka Doncic, who I mentioned earlier, just bigger and stronger than most other players his position. So giving him the opportunity to be in the post a little bit more, while guys like Ivy can handle the ball and guys like Ausar Thompson can handle the ball. And of course, this team is going to be incredible on defense with Thompson, with Jalen Duren, with Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart in there, and they got some shooters, Duncan Robinson, Karis LeVert. They're still going to have that off the bench punch that they had last year with Malik Beasley, who is had an interesting offseason to say the least, with gambling allegations and all sorts of things that are keeping him out of the league at this moment. They've replaced that production with some other good offensive production. Another reason I'm optimistic for the Pistons this year is they aren't really. I don't think they're going to improve greatly. I don't think they go to being a 50-win team all of a sudden, but that doesn't really drop them in the Eastern Conference because of how weak the East is. They can have a worse year than they did last year, I think, or a similarly good year to the year they did last year and still be a 3 or 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. They're pretty talented, and I think obviously a lot of the time and success isn't a linear progression. So I could see them sort of peaking at what they did last year, around 44, 48 wins, and that being good enough to still get you home court advantage, and that being good enough to still get them a really high seed in the Eastern Conference. And Cade Cunningham is going to have an All-NBA season again this year. I think Jaden Ivey could flirt with an all-star team if he continues to improve and produce at the levels that he has produced so far in his career. So I'm excited for what this team could be. I'm excited for the depth, the backcourt depth with a healthy Ivy, with a healthy Ausar Thompson. And like I said, guys like Duren, Tobias Harris, Isaiah Stewart in the front court do give them a little bit of an extra punch. So this is another team that you should be optimistic for. They're a team that I'm going to be high on come record predictions. And if you're a Pistons fan, after a lot of seasons of not fun, of torture, there's back-to-back seasons where you can be really optimistic. And I think this season, especially coming into the season, there's high expectations in Detroit for the first time ever, and I think they're going to be able to match those expectations, certainly. So moving on to my final team, or the final team in the division, that'll be the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls, like I said, they are playing juggernauts. They're there every year. Will they be there this year? Probably. Why I'm optimistic for the Bulls is I think there's finally hope for the first time in a while that they have a lot of bites at the apple that one of the guys on the team could end up the cornerstone, or a cornerstone of the future roster. One of these guys could be a guy that is on the next good Chicago Bulls roster, whether it's a Giddey, a Matas Buzelis, a Noah Senge, who they just drafted, or even Kobe White, who's a little bit older. They have some duplicity. They have chances. They have guys who can fizzle out and it doesn't kill them. They're no longer banking singularly on a Giddey progression, on a Buzelis progression, or on a Senge progression. They just kind of need one of those guys to hit, and I'm confident that one of them will. The Bulls could, again, be in the play-in because the East is so weak. They will be in that 9-10 discussion once again. I'm 100% confident in that. And then you look more specifically at these guys I mentioned and what they did last season. Giddey averaged 21, 11, and 9 post All-Star break, and he shot 50% from the field, 46% from three. His biggest deficiencies in his years with the Thunder was his ability to shoot and his defense. But if he can continue to be an above league average, or just even a league average shooter with the playmaking that he brings, with the size that he brings as a point guard, then he's an all-star caliber player, and maybe finally starts to reach the lofty expectations that I think a lot of people had for him when he started his career in OKC. Then you got Noah Senge, who averaged 13 and 5 in the summer league in limited action. He is a Giannis build type of guy, 6'11 guy, skinny project player guy, and I think a lot of people aren't very high on him because of how much of a project he is. He seemed like a little bit of a reach in the draft, but I'm just excited to see what he looks like. And like I said, a project player is kind of they're always fun. They're kind of always a little bit exciting to watch because it could be a pot of gold. You never know. And then Montes Buzelis is the guy I'm most excited about. He averaged 13 and 5 as a starter in 31 games last year, shot 47% from the field, 35% from three. So I think he could continue to grow. He's a good defender as well. So I think he's got the most potential to hit out of any of these guys. But for the first time in a while, that's 3 or 4 names of guys on the Bulls who actually I could see popping one or two of them. And if one or two of them can pop and they finally have a franchise cornerstone, then they can finally be in a position to commit to one direction or the other, I think. And that's been one of the things that's been holding the Bulls back is inability to commit to any sort of era of Chicago Bulls. Right now, they're sort of in this play-in era, and it's hard to see a way out of it unless one of these guys hits. So if I'm a Bulls fan, I'm optimistic because I'm looking at all of these guys who have had flashy numbers in certain sections of their careers and certain stretches. And I'm thinking if just one of those guys can look like a piece, can look like a cornerstone, this is a good year. And we'll probably make the play-in again anyways. So if the added bonus of one of these guys looking like a good piece, that's a reason to be optimistic if I'm a fan of the Chicago Bulls. So there you have it, guys. That is one reason why I'm optimistic for every team in the NBA's Central Division. This is the best division in the Eastern Conference. We're probably looking at 4 playoff to play-in team, 5 possibly. This division could represent half of the Eastern Conference play-in / playoffs next year, which is crazy to think about. So yeah, I'm excited to watch these teams play. I'm optimistic for most of them, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. On tomorrow's, we'll be discussing the Southeast Division in the Eastern Conference. So that's the Hawks, the Heat, the Magic, the Wizards, and the Charlotte Hornets. So excited to talk about those 5 teams. Excited to try to find reasons to be optimistic for the Hornets and the Wizards, for the Hawks, the Magic, and kind of the Heat. It should be pretty easy. So again, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I look forward to talking some more ball with you guys tomorrow.